Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. I'm your host, Kat Spada, and this week I'm joined by some familiar voices, Feminist Frequency founder and executive director Anita Sarkeesian, and the director of Feminist Frequency's games and online harassment hotline, Jae Lin. Welcome back to the show, Anita, and welcome, Jae. Maybe you've been on the show before.
I think just a couple of times. It's so excited to be here again.
Awesome.
Hi.
Anita, hi.
What's up?
Well, we're here to have a very emotionally, exhausting conversation. I hope by the end of this, everyone is fully worn out and in tears. Just kidding. By the time this podcast is out, you may have heard the news that after 14 years, Feminist Frequency is closing down. So this is a very special episode. We're going to talk about how Anita and the team came to this decision, a little bit about what it means for different programs and for the community. And there may be some questions that listeners might still have after reading the announcement online this week. So we'll talk about it. We'll answer some questions. It's actually just going to be a fun chat because we are three people who like each other and we're talking about something that is interesting and compelling and strange. And that is the nature of this work. So
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Anita.
Kat.
Can I congratulate you on this decision?
Yes. Thank you.
Can we start there? I feel like this took a lot. This whole thing took a lot, but really just coming to this decision saying it's time. I think a lot of people would be afraid to do that.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting. We've been prepping for months. We made this decision a few months back and we've been prepping and talking to community partners, and everyone is kind of do I say I'm sorry or congratulations? They don't really know how to react to this news. And it is, it's a good thing for me personally. Yeah. So I will take the congratulations, this is a big deal. It's so interesting because I'm not really sure how people are going to react. I have a kind of an inkling based on just the dozen or so people who know already. But, we've been doing this for 14 years. It'll be 15 years by the time it's actually buttoned up and done. And I feel like most people have jobs for 2 to 5 years or something. And so I was a little bit yeah, this is okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that I do something else now. But it's hard when your identity, my identity and how I'm known is attached to this. This was my organization. Obviously run with an enormous amount of help, but it is very tied to me as an individual. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little bit tired, it's just, I've been tired for a long time and I haven't been willing to admit it, or be willing to kind of let this go. And I think unfortunately it is happening because I overdid it. Right. I pushed myself a little too far. And I'm at such an extreme level of burnout with this particular type of work. And I just kind of need to step back from it.
You just touched on so many things that we're going to have to come back to because each of them requires a little more of a conversation. But one thing that strikes me is you saying people have jobs for 2 to 5 years. This is a decade and a half that has also come with so much change. It maybe was something for a couple of years and then it turned into something else for a couple of years and it grew and it grew and it grew. And we're not here to do the history lesson on Feminist Frequency. People will be able to get their hands on the annual report next year, which I think will have a little bit more of a look back. But can you talk a little bit about that, about the kind of reaction, responsive way that you've acted over the last 14 years with this? It wasn't just I'm setting out to do X and I did X for 14 years. It was nothing like that.
Yeah, nothing like that. Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. It has been a lot of different things, which is kind of why I think I was able to continue doing it because, we would adjust with the times to some degree. When I first started, I just made videos and that was just a thing. And some people watched them occasionally. And then it kind of, people forget or don't know that Feminist Frequency existed before the tropes in the video game series. Mm-hmm. So I was doing this for a while before that even started. And then when the Tropes Kickstarter got the attention that it got, it also came with being an activist around online harassment and abuse. So it became two jobs. It became 200 jobs really, but it really became like, I'm doing media criticism. I'm talking about what is in the games and how that impacts us and how we can make games be better for larger and different audiences. And also talking about how do we make the internet a safer place for folks? How do we support people who are being attacked? And those are like two very intense jobs on their own, trying to juggle both of those constantly was a challenge. And so we did that. And then at some point I was like, well, we've already the landscape changed so significantly from when I first started doing this. So people were not really doing educational videos online. Like there was definitely like a crew of people, but there weren't a lot. Mm-hmm. And there weren't people doing like hours long videos about like cultural analysis. And so at some point I was like, the landscape has changed. People, doing web video commentary, sort of left tube, bread tube, as people call it, like became a thing when it wasn't before. And I was like, well, I don't need to keep doing this because there are younger, more excited people with different analysis and like younger, fresher analysis that can come in and do some of this work. So we really shifted gears. And that's when Jae joined us and we started doing more work directly about abuse and harassment and how do we support people in that way, because there's such a void. There's such a hole there in terms of like how to get support if you're struggling. And that's not to say that there weren't again, people were not talking about mental health in games or mental health generally in a mainstream way as they are now. And so we kind of just like plugged into that next sort of phase of how we're talking about games and how we're thinking about how games are made, who's making them, how are they being treated, and all of that kind of stuff. So I do think of Feminist Frequency kind of as two big phases of, the media, the cultural media analysis, and then the mental health, working to end abuse, changing games culture piece of it, which we've been doing more recently.
Yeah, Jae, I feel like you kind of have gone through a microcosmic version of the same thing, of just a lot of change over the last couple of years since coming in to run the games, an online harassment hotline. Can you talk to people about that and about kind of what's grown, what's changed, and what people can expect next?
Yeah, it's been so much growing and learning kind of by the nature of this work, Anita was just like describing it in these two phases. And I think when we decided we wanted to have this different role of how do we like try and change the industry? How do we change game spaces and offer support and show what support could look like in game spaces and around online harassment? That's a really different role. And as a hotline too, it's our job to listen and to provide what folks are asking for, which was such a journey. I feel like I first was hearing about this idea, this potential in about 2019. And I was talking with my friend Vu, who I play TTRPGs with. He was my Vampire the Masquerade GM, and brought up one day that I was thinking about like games and a hotline thing, maybe like a mental health type resource. And that was just really like so many intersections of my passion and my life. And so started talking to him a little bit about that in 2019, and then was brought on in 2020 as officially part of the team to help launch this thing. And even in that process, we took most of the year of 2020 to think through things and set up our infrastructure. We were really making guesses, pretty informed guesses, based on Anita's just knowledge and experience being in the industry for so long, as well as just things that we had heard about from other survivors and targets of harassment about what we might prepare for. But then really just like the first week running, it was like, oh, we didn't think about that at all.
Right.
Then, certain themes and topics would come through in different seasons. And we'd be like, okay, we need to be more ready for that next time. And so even just running the hotline has been such a iterative and evolutionary process. It's been kind of exciting to stay on our toes in this different way.
And for people who are listening, I want to make sure that they go to the website. Both Feminist Frequency and the game's hotline website will have details about what's next. But for the hotline, people can still contact the hotline until the end of September. Is that right?
Yeah, till September 30th.
Okay. And then there's a bunch of resources. So you're going to be seeing these continue to pop up on your social media over the next couple of months, and they're going to be living on the website. So resources for the workplace, resources for employees, resources for gamers. I think I want to make sure that people know that stuff's not going away. The catalog or the library of Feminist Frequency is also not going away. We'll talk more about that later. But can you tell our listeners, Jae, a little bit about Respect, which is a program that will still be continuing?
Yeah. So we started Respect in the summer of 2022. We had been working. One of the things that, as I mentioned, we really didn't anticipate when we launched the hotline was the fact that folks who had caused harassment, abuse, and harm would start texting in. And so we definitely had to kind of build up new training modules for our agents and different ways of taking those conversations so that we could offer the support that we wanted to offer while still kind of holding a line of accountability and hopefully holding the door open to change. Because so many of the folks that we were talking to were bringing to us the shame and regret and embarrassment that they felt around the actions that they had done, as well as the pain and sadness and isolation they were feeling after, being faced with consequences for their action. And so we wanted to hold all of that. And as we did, we really found that there weren't a lot of resources for folks who wanted to change their behavior. And folks were really kind of feeling a lot of confusion and, again, a lot of that isolation as their two main struggles towards changing their behavior. And so we're like, well, what if we started this support groupy or the supportive space where folks could actually come together who shared that experience, right? All people who had caused harm in game spaces, and kind of process and go through those things together. If we're all committed to accountability in some way, we have this shared experience, can we, rather than doing it on our own, together, pull apart some of what happened and figure out, and work through that confusion of what needs to actually change to be a person that doesn't do that anymore. So we started that last summer and have been running it, since then. And it has been actually really hope-giving and transformative and, in the space that is very different from the hotline, but holds a lot of the same values and gives me a lot of hope around, really breaking some of these cycles of violence that we see happen over and over again.
So people can continue to find out more about that on our website. It's difficult to try to decide how much to talk about programs and work and how much to talk about people. I think we all recognize that there is a circular Venn diagram here. So, Anita, you talked about one of the reasons this is happening is because you were maybe trying to do too much or doing too much too fast. And now we have the opportunity to hold a conversation about burnout that is non-judgmental and just acknowledging the reality of this. And I have to imagine, even as we're talking about it, you're still dealing with it. So, if at any point you're can you ask a different question? Just please let me know.
Yeah, let's just talk about the new Barbie movie.
Okay. I'm dressed like Ken today.
Excellent. Which Ken,
Beach.
There's so many Kens. Yeah. Yeah. Beach Ken.
Stereotypical beach Ken.
Was that a question? No.
No,
I just got derailed by talking about Barbie.
Look, who among us? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's really a question of how much you want to share, because I think that's part of the issue, is that this has been so tied up in your external identity, but then also how that doesn't turn off when you shut your laptop, that doesn't turn off when you go to sleep. You know, being the face of this organization and being the face of like a mission for people has, I think, probably even compounding impact on your well-being compared to just like, oh, I'm working a lot of hours. So is there anything that you feel like sharing about that? If not,
sure.
You know.
Yeah. It it's definitely more than just I work too much.
Yeah.
I think that people who do activism and social justice work understand this and people who work in nonprofits generally, I think, have this extra layer of, but the work we're doing is so important and helps people. And so we need to sacrifice our well-being in order to keep the movement, keep the trajectory going, to not turn down any opportunities for engagement, audience, because you feel so strongly about what you're working on. And so this is not even remotely unique to me by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's something that we deal with in this space a lot. And so, when the harassment hit, I had a choice about whether I was going to engage with it or not engage with it. But like, let's be honest, it didn't feel like a choice.
Right.
It felt like I need to do this. I understand this space. I'm good at talking, and I know how to talk about these issues in ways that I think a lot of other folks are just don't understand because of my background, my educational background, and my activist background, and like it hit the games industry in a way that folks in this space are not like trained in this kind of stuff, right? And so I was like, well, I don't have a choice. I have to deal with it. Like I have to engage with this, right? And it became so important to do. And and I don't think it's not important, but I think there's a little bit of like, we get real in our heads about our own martyrdom a little bit, and the cost of that and what that means and what that looks like. And the reality is I had people coming to me like every time I stepped out the door being like, I'm dealing with this harassment, or like, it's so brave of you to speak up, or like, your presence is so important. And like, what am I supposed to do? Just like leave? Like it's really hard to it's not that it was hard to hold that. It was hard to recognize the weight of that because you're just in it all the time. So, the other thing is that people are not their jobs, and they are not the symbol in which you ascribe to them. And there are other things happening in their life. So I had a bunch of stuff happening in my personal life while this stuff was happening, like while the other, like the harassment and abuse was happening. And I never talked about that publicly because why would I? Why would I open myself up to more abuse? And I think we sometimes forget that people are humans when they take on this symbolic role. And I think we as people that hold those positions also forget that we're human and have needs. Like I think it's not just that it's put on us, it's that we also project that out in the way that we engage. So that was a really long way of saying like, it took me a long time to realize that this was a problem. It took me a long time to realize that like, I can't keep going to this level. And there, when I did start being like, I don't really want to talk about harassment anymore. Like, I don't feel like doling out my abuse and my trauma to audiences every month constantly and interviews and stuff like that. And so my solution to that was, I'm still going to do talks, but I'm not going to talk about my harassment. I'm just going to play a video clip of having talked about it before. And it was very meta and weird, but I was like, it made a big difference for me in terms of like not having to verbalize it every single time. And then that wasn't enough. And it got to a point where I was like, I can't, like, I'm it was really just like, I don't want to do this anymore. So we start this hotline while I'm in the thick of not wanting to do this anymore. And it's a hotline about abuse and harassment. And I'm like still kind of the face of this thing. And I'm just like, how do I manage this? And I sort of managed it by saying, I can talk about generally what's happening, but I'm not telling you my story anymore.
Right.
And now I'm just like, I can't do this. I can't do any of it. Right. So it took steps. Like I took little steps to get to the point of being like, I can't keep trotting this out over and over again.
It sounds like you had several moments, and this is very familiar even as someone who hasn't walked down the same path as you, but who has been in the like mission-based work life mode for many years, of not having choice. I think that is a feeling that is almost inescapable. And to have over the last few months made the kind of like, once you give a mouse a cookie, right? Once you realized you could make a decision to do this, you're then faced with more choices and more opportunities to like have some agency in what's happening. Some people might wonder why Feminist Frequency is closing and not changing hands. And I think Jae and you, Anita, have both mentioned like other people in the space who are doing work, and whether or not that existed in 2009. Like, is this an opportunity to talk to people about the landscape and like what you think you might see in the video games landscape and this advocacy side of it for the next few months? Is that like 5 different questions? Did I like start 5 different questions?
I'm staring at Jae being like, do you have an answer?
Just, I'll start with like, you know, the decision you made is to close Feminist Frequency and not to step away personally. And I think that people might wonder to hear a little more about that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about my side of it. And Jae, maybe you can share how you feel about it. When we started the hotline, we were like, well, the hotline is a project of Feminist Frequency. We're still going to keep Feminist Frequency going, and we're going to do other projects around that, blah, 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 blah. And at some point, I was like, we're just running the hotline, and all the projects we're doing are through the lens of the values of the hotline. Like, Feminist Frequency isn't really a thing anymore. You know, like, people may or may not know the name Feminist Frequency. They definitely know tropes, but they don't know Feminist Frequency. And like the work we're doing is pretty separate from that work, although I would argue it's very related. And so there was a little bit of like, we had so many conversations about like the framing and the like of the two names of these things, and when we would use one and when we wouldn't use another. And I, you know, poor Jae has listened to me talk about this a million fucking times, but like, I was like, maybe we shouldn't use Feminist Frequency. Maybe people are afraid of it. Maybe we should. And like, this went on for fucking years.
Yeah.
And like, just, I'm cycling through the like, how do we benefit the hotline the most? And if it's attached to Feminist Frequency and me, is that going to be a problem? Because, you know, like, while times have changed and clearly the work that we did has had a huge impact, like, people are still afraid of me, you know, like they're still afraid of being associated with me. And some people, not most people, but some people, right? So that is a long way of saying that, like, shutting down the Feminist Frequency side of things at this point doesn't really matter. We're not making videos anymore. It really was just the podcast, which is going to continue, and I'm super excited about that. So it's really became an issue of like, what do we do with this hotline? Like, it is helping people. There's nothing else like it. And not nothing, but like and there really isn't. Like, there are other support helplines, but like, we really inhabit a very unique place, mostly to the amazing work that Jae has done to really constantly iterate and grow based on community feedback. And Jae and I had a big retreat, and we had talked about a lot of feelings, and we're like, what are all the options? Like, what do we do? Like, I was like, I need to peace out. What does that mean for you? And what does that mean for the hotline? And ultimately, at the end of the day, we decided that it didn't make sense, like, logistically, to keep the hotline running or to give it to another org, or to like, it's just a little too complex, and it's a little like, there's a fear around, like, we have very specific values of how we run the hotline. And I got a little nervous about like what it would mean to pass that on.
Right.
And how long it would take for us to be able to do that in a way that like honors what we are trying to do. And so I think having it running for 3 years is pretty amazing that we did it. I think that I'm a little bit sad that we didn't like fully see it through in the ways that Jae might be able to talk about. but I'm still kind of like, holy fuck, we launched a hotline. What did I know about hotlines before 2019? Zero, nothing. And then we like created this amazing thing. So I'm trying to think of it as like, we're making the best decisions for us as individuals in this, and to be proud of what we've done.
Yeah. And I think, I see a lot of this choice to close, to end, to sunset, as a real act of leadership from you, Anita. And I think as we were having that conversation, I was holding a lot of that too. Being Hotline director is like kind of my first like real leadership position and opportunity in my own life. And yeah, I think a big part of this conversation too was, of course, the burnout aspect for you, but also, you know, in the sense of the hotline, we were really kind of just building this railroad as we were running.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was scrappy. It allowed us to make bold decisions, like, you know, along our values of like not calling police on folks, and around, you know, incorporating like survivor centered and, like justice informed lenses into our trainings and the work of the hotline and all of that. And that was really cool and exciting. We were, able to do that because we were a small team and a small service. And at the same time, we really learned as we went along, like how much infrastructure it takes to do this sustainably. And the realistic like place that we found ourselves here, you know, in 2023 is that it didn't feel ready to sustain on its own as its own thing and keep its own integrity with the infrastructure that we have here. And I think it's a really wonderful opportunity to offer. I felt offered the agency to decide to sunset it. I think we're talking about burnout and how, and social justice work, activism work, that type of thing. And the way that a lot of these spaces run is that the people who are often most directly impacted and most marginalized are carrying the heaviest loads. And, you know, it is right for the most impacted folks to have leadership, and that's a lot. and it's exhausting for a really long time. And so for us to, I think, really reclaim that agency and say, hey, every project doesn't have to be forever. It can matter that we did this for this long. All the people that we reached in these 3 years, like we really made a difference to all of them. And we have to, remember our own humanity. And especially as a service that's by and for the games community, we are a part of that community too. And to give ourselves the permission to say like, hey, we don't have to push ourselves over the edge for this work. We deserve care too. And sometimes that care looks like stopping and ending and resting.
Yeah. One thing that I've been reflecting on that had come up in the last, I'd say 6 months or so, maybe less than that, is, and I'm thinking about it because you were talking about like leadership in terms of like making the choice to do this and to step away, is that I didn't realize how, I'm going to say checked out, but I think that's a little bit dramatic because I was like obviously still running this thing and I was around and I was like supporting the work, but I was like kind of half like irritated and annoyed all the time. And I don't mean that and I was like treating my employees bad. It was that like there was, you know, Jae, I don't know if you want to talk about this or we can cut this if you don't feel comfortable with it, but there was this like sense of isolation that I think Jae felt because I had been doing this for so long and I'm so like, I don't think bitter is the right word, but I'm just like real, cynical about the industry at this point, and rightfully so. Like, I don't think that it is unreasonable that I'm there. And Jae's coming in a little bit newer, not without your own experiences in the industry, but like newer to this direct work. And I think that there was I didn't realize how much my cynicism was impacting the team, like the whole team, because I am pretty transparent, but I didn't realize that it was a problem. And I think that that's also part of this is like, as Jae, as you started to communicate this to me and we started to recognize this as like, you know, this very kind of underlying, almost impossible to recognize current, I was like, oh, like I need to make a choice about like whether I can show up fully for this team or not. And I can't, like I can't at this point and this state that I'm in. And so some of it is like, I feel extremely lucky to have had this like journey of like starting as a like independent creator and then starting a team and like learning how to manage and kind of fucking it up a bunch and then like trying and iterating and going. And it wasn't until Jae came on in the last 3 years that I feel like I like really figured out how to manage teams. And like, it's kind of one of the things that I loved the most about this work. But in that, if I couldn't show up fully in a way that like created excitement and interest and empowerment to my team, like that's not being a good leader anymore, you know?
I think you're both modeling some really good like approach also to looking inward, but also like checking in with yourself in the workplace, because I think that this is something that it took me many years into my professional life to recognize that like, okay, my personal values need to be as important to me as the values that are on my job description, and how do we marry those two things? And talking about like being able to, for you two to have had that retreat and be able to have the conversation about like, what is serving us as individuals and what is the work that we're doing? Where is it being failed by the fact that we are failing ourselves? That's like something that I hope people can learn from and start to ask themselves. I mean, in the same way that at some point you realize you can, you don't have to like all the same things that other people like. It's like, oh, you start to realize, hey, is this program that I'm in really serving me? You know, is this relationship that I'm in doing what I need it to do for me? Like that we ask those questions of our work is something that is probably it was new to me very recently. So,
yeah.
So Anita, I think a lot of people will want to know what's next. Clearly, you're about to start a brand new enterprise and put all of your time and energy into it. And for those of you who don't want to give you a minute or 5 to breathe, is there anything you want to share about what is next for you?
It's amazing. It's like someone has a baby and then everyone's like, when's your next one coming? And you're like, what the fuck? Let me have this fucking child. So my teenager, I'm sending off into the ether. Yeah, honestly, we talk about burnout a lot. I mean, there's no way for me to talk about what we're doing without it. And the thing about burnout is that if you can take time off, and it's something that we, like Jae and I at Feminist Frequency, really worked and iterated on to be like, how do we avoid burnout? What do we do when it happens? How do we like prevent it in the future? And it never ends, right? Like I feel like we were constantly iterating on this. And you can take time off, which we did, and then you come back and you're still burnt out.
Right.
So, you know, like burnout follows you. It doesn't go away just because you took a couple of weeks off. So for me, if I'm being truly honest, and I am at this point because I wouldn't be shutting this down if I wasn't, I need to actually deal with this. I need to deal with this like 15 years of burnout.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and take a break as much as I can, given financial and personal things that happen in terms of like, how do you sustain after this? But I'm gonna see if I can deal with this, because one of the things that burnout does is it's, at least for me, it's like, well, I'm not good at anything. There was a line. Okay, I didn't really like the Barbie movie, I just have to say, even though I'm gonna like quote it right now. But there was a line in it where stereotypical Barbie is like, I'm not good at anything, and I totally started crying. Like, I was just like, wow, I feel this, and the reality is that's not true. I'm actually good at a lot of things, and I'm excited about a lot of things, but I'm not when I'm burnt out. Yeah. So that's like, I don't know what's next. I have no idea. I'm just excited to be excited about something again. And I know that will come back, and I know my confidence will come back, and I know that like I will do something fucking cool again, but it's just not right now. So in the meantime, while I'm trying to navigate this, I've been doing consulting on video games, like inclusivity, sensitivity reading consulting, for years now. It's just kind of like a side thing that I've been doing. So I'm going to continue doing that because I love that work. I think it's really like rewarding to have that kind of impact directly on games and to stay kind of connected. And then I'm just going to see what happens next, you know?
That's really huge. Like,
yeah.
And scary. It's scary to not know.
Don't forget about me.
Is this so dorky? I'm going to send you a poem after this that I stumbled upon this week that also made me cry about the risk, the fear of risk in uncertainty. But it's very important to take that time for yourself. And I read the book about burnout because I'm the sort of person who's like, I'm struggling. What homework can I do to apply to the struggle?
Yeah, we're all like that.
So I read Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And the one thing that I kind of carry with me is like, oh, if I'm running away from a predator, which is the way I feel a lot of the time. But then there's no conclusion to that feeling. You know, there's no like, and then I got eaten, or then I fought the predator and like won. Then that just kind of turns into a tornado in my gut and head and heart.
I think they call it closing the stress cycle.
Yeah.
That's a bit, and I was like, I've never figured out how to do that. Yeah. You know, like they talk about like finishing a book or going for a run. And then like, there's something that clicks at some point. And I was like, that's never fucking happened for me. I have no idea what you're talking about. But, that book is very good. I saw Emily and Amelia speak at, XOXO, and this was years ago. I should have known, but they did a talk, and in their talk, they started singing Moana in the middle of like talking about burnout. And I was sobbing, like just uncontrollably in the audience crying. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm burnt out. Maybe I'm not doing so great.
This is a great, like, again, a great modeling example of like, for those of us who are like, what extra work can I do to make me feel better about the work that I'm doing? Is like, sometimes the rest has to be productive.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I have a whole list of books that I plan on reading when I'm done. And like one of them is The Nap Ministry, which I think talks a lot about this kind of thing. Jae, I believe you've read it and done some trainings around that stuff.
Yes, it's a quite a spiritual text for me. And I think I really love the spirit with which she like infuses like the topics around rest as resistance, with this lens. I think that speaks to a lot of people like us around capitalism, like racial capitalism, and the ways that it just really ingrains into our lives. Another really great book that I like is Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devin Price, which also adds, I think, a really good like disability and class perspective to the concept of laziness, which I know for me drives a lot of my overworking and burnout cycles. I think what's something really beautiful coming out of this conversation for me is talking about, the little kind of iterative steps that have like built us up in this journey, and then now to this point, this sunset. And I think that is really powerful because we often want, like, I'm going to read this book and do this homework and then it'll be fixed. And also we want to think about, our symbols and our movements as we're going to work really hard, or this is going to represent this thing, and then it will be one, or like, I think this illusion of like a binary state of doing well or not doing well, winning or losing, pushes us because we're like, it's either so close or it's so important or something that we get there, we just need to get there. when that's just not really how movements or life or change works. And I think within our own little ecosystem of feminist frequency, I don't know, some of the ways that this story is unfolding here is really making me realize, how many like little steps of like thinking about like, okay, what does it look like if we rest more? Okay, what does leadership and the way we want to treat each other on our team actually really mean? And then the million questions that followed that question, and digging into those things also for you, Anita, like personally, like showing you what you can and can't do, and actually like looking at each of those questions, to then eventually like lead you to this decision in the place we are now. And I think that to me feels, people have been asking me like, what I feel proud of in this work as it's closing. And I talk a lot about, how important the hotline was, and the work that we did, and respec, and how that's, I don't know, why I want to continue that, and how proud I feel of it. But also, honestly, like one of the things I am proudest of in at Feminist Frequency is how intentional we were with the way that we treat each other, with our culture, the ways that we looked at things when it wasn't working anymore, when we misunderstood each other, when we hurt each other's feelings, and just around how we did it, how we looked at the weight of doing all this emotional labor, taking on kind of some of this burden of change as directly impacted folks, and really trying and messing up and trying again in so many different ways, internally in this work, and in ways that aren't necessarily going to come out in a external way, but I just feel so much pride and love around.
And there's a whole team behind the scenes that I think everyone I've talked to anyway has felt like, okay, like this is the next step, this is an okay step. This is an okay thing. Like, I think, Anita, you should also take some heart in the fact that like the people that work with you on this project are really happy for you to take some time away.
Nobody that knows me was at all surprised about this decision. I want to acknowledge what Jae was talking about, because I think that one of the things that kept me here for so long was our team and how we run it. And so like, it's nice to hear you talk about that, Jae, and how like, why would I give this up? Like there's really like, this was a thing that I was like, I got to build the team I wanted to build with the people I wanted to build it with, the culture I wanted it to be. And I say that in like that was informed by the people that came in, and that was informed by like, it was so collaborative how we built this community. And when new people came in, it shifted and changed, and they brought new things in, and we adjusted, and it just grew richer and richer. And I hear about other people's workplaces and they sound terrible, and like, there's so many people that have worked for us that have come in who were very traumatized from other jobs. And as someone who hadn't had that experience, I never understood why they didn't believe me when I was like, yeah, if you can't do that thing, just don't do it, or like, you're tired, like take some time off. Like, it took a long time for me to build trust with certain people, because I think jobs are really a lot of jobs are really soulless, and they care more about the work product than they do about the people. And I think that Jae and I were able to build a space that really like cared about each other before anything else. And we were constantly like, I can't do that. I have too much on my plate. And the conversation would be like, what do we take off? Mm-hmm. Can someone take it on? If no one can take it on, it just doesn't happen. And I think I'm really proud of that. And I feel like I learned a lot. And I think Jae coming in and our relationship together and how we communicated and how we complement each other really well, allowed so much space to bring emotion and humanity into management and into how we want to exist. So we didn't do everything we set out to do, but we did it in a way that cared for each other. And I think that's way more important than anything else, you know?
I think that I want to remind people to check out the website, where there might be some more details, where you can stay tuned. First of all, where you can access all of the resources and everything that's been put out by Feminist Frequency, the guides that the Games Hotline has put together, those are all going to remain online for free. Please utilize them, share them.
Yeah. So both of the Feminist Frequency and the Games Hotline website will become an archived site. It's going to continue to be hosted and stay online. We are working on redesigning them so that it is easier to navigate and so that people can understand, like, we're not open, but we have all these like amazing information guides that have been built up over the years. So that won't be out yet. They won't be changed yet, but they will, before everything is wrapped up, be available. So, you know, don't go to the website today thinking that it's going to
right
look any different, but it will be there.
But if you want to be in the loop, you can still subscribe to the newsletter. And then next year, when the annual report is published, you'll also be able to get maybe more like really nitty gritty information. I always feel like for the nonprofits that I've supported personally, I've always appreciated being able to look to that annual report and feel proud of the organization that I've cared for. And if I can insert myself into this narrative for a minute, I want to thank you, Anita, for encouraging me to continue the podcast, which is staying around. It will carry on beyond the closure of the organization. There will still be Feminist Frequency Radio. So just putting that out there, that when we had this conversation, you were like, you should keep doing the podcast. And I was like, okay, I'd like to. So,
like, I love this podcast. I think it's fucking great. You know, it was started with me, Carolyn, and Ebony, and we worked together, and I think we had such a great dynamic because we were so different, and it like really made for interesting conversations. And then, you know, time goes on, people get new jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And then Ebony was like, so I'm going to peace out tomorrow, but I got this new person that you joined. And I was like, great. And I think, Kat, you brought, again, a whole nother flavor and a whole nother like humor and intelligence to this podcast in a way that like is just different than it was before. And so I was like really happy that you're going to continue this, because if I'm going to there was part of me that's like, maybe I can keep doing the podcast. And I was like, I need to take a full like separation from this work for a while. So I encourage everyone to keep subscribing to the Patreon, keep listening to the podcast, keep sharing it. I think that there's going to be some really special, I think it's going to continue to be really special and have a lot of the same energy that you've been coming to the podcast for. And I'll be back sometimes.
Yeah.
I got so many opinions. My opinions have not gone anywhere, you know?
They are now they're going to be bottled up, and then I'm going to come and help you share them with this audience.
And I do want to say too that like, because like I could see fucking burnout is everywhere. I could see how much I was slacking on the podcast, you know, like, or I was really phoning it in sometimes. And when you came on, I was like, damn, you're like really good at this, Kat. Like you're such a good interviewer. You're so thoughtful. You're so prepared. And it made me be like, I shouldn't be here anymore.
That really is that horrible moment in Barbie where you're just like, well, if I'm chemically not attuned to the things I'm doing right now, then clearly I am bad and bad at everything, and no one wants me around. And it's like, that's not the case.
But what I say that, not to be self-deprecating, but to be like, I think like I'm excited about the energy you bring to this podcast and like the renewed excitement and interest in it.
Well, I'm excited for people to keep listening and having conversations with me. I'm currently in a social media moment where I'm not like engaging with a lot of people because what the hell is happening? But I've really enjoyed being a part of it since last year, and continuing it on is something I'm very honored and proud of. And yeah, so you'll keep hearing my dulcet-ish tones from week to week. So finally, as we wrap up this conversation, I imagine you have a non-exhaustive, incomplete list of some people that you might want to thank while we're closing out this chat.
Yeah. So, I mean, so many people have made, this work possible and have really shaped these like 3-4 years that I've been with Feminist Frequency. I think I want to start with, one of kind of my goals and ulterior motives when I joined the org was to really like bring and imbue abolitionist principles into whatever work I was doing. It just feels so integral to creating healthier communities and building a better future and a better world for all of us. And so, whether that looked like, abolitionist choices on the hotline or integrating like transformative justice into some of the like respec work that we do and accountability stuff that we do on the hotline. I felt really strongly about that. And it has felt like something that I don't know. I feel proud of like kind of continuing this lineage of Feminist Frequency as this really, really like visionary organization that brings really fun, exciting new social justice concepts into game spaces. And so with that, I think I want to start by thanking a lot of the folks who have informed that thinking for me, including Shira Hassan, who has helped shape Respec through the Interrupting Criminalization Help Desk, really has truly had her fingers in the way that I think and conceptualize that program. And then, other folks like Mariam Kaba, whose work I've read so extensively, and Mia Mingus, who just started Soil, which is a TJ project, as like a new organization that is doing really, really incredible and exciting work around transformative justice. I think starting there and then more like kind of nitty gritty into like the everyday. Take This has been such a like sibling organization with us, has supported us really at every turn, has been such an anchor as another org that has been doing mental health work in games for so long. And just Eve, the executive director, is just incredibly generous and kind and sweet and super supportive. We hadn't talked a lot about our call center partner before, just because of like security and privacy concerns. But as we close out, we are including some gratitude for them in like the Hotline Impact Report, for example, and the annual report coming up. And so I want to thank the folks there at headquarters, Kansas, especially Erica, Jess, and Annie, who have really held it down, and really none of this could have been possible without them. I think that's my non-exhaustive list, the first folks that come to mind in my heart in this moment. But I'll pass it to Anita and then interrupt if I think of more.
I honestly, I don't like, you'd think I'd be more prepared with this since we've been talking about this for months now, but it's 15 years of people, like I'm afraid to name any names because it's been so many people have allowed this work to happen and supported it. So like, more generally speaking, I think it's like, I think about all of the people who were on board early, who like stepped up early and were like, this is valuable and important, and we care about this stuff. The people like the game studios that invited me out to speak, like before I ever released a video or said anything, and was like just kind of interested and curious in having sort of feminist analysis in this work. It was extremely encouraging to me how I would meet game developers who would be like, well, you talk shit about my game, but you were right. And I'm never going to do that again. And that was when I was like, oh, things can change. Like the people who are making games are going to start making them differently. Right. And we've seen that, and that's been happening. So all the people who had the difficult conversations in their workplaces, all the people who advocated for better workplace culture, different games, better, like more diverse teams, like that's the work, like I helped provide maybe some of the language, some of the education around it. But it was really the people in those spaces who made the change happen, you know? So there's that. And then there's also like all of the donors over the years. Like for the first several years of Feminist Frequency, actually for many years, we were run exclusively on donations by individuals. And we were so unique when I started talking to other nonprofits because we ran almost exclusively on donations, but also on small donations by a lot of people, which is kind of unheard of. And so like, that's weird and amazing and cool. Like people, it's not people with enormous means. It's people who are just like, I really care about this. I have a few dollars and I think it's worth it to allow this work to continue. And, you know, the thing about nonprofits is like, we are literally a charity. We're constantly begging for money to do the work. And the fact that we did not need to go to corporate sponsors or grants for a really long time meant that we had no, not oversight's not the right word, but we had no one telling us what to say or how to say it. We could be sincere and true to like what we believed without sacrificing any of that. And I feel pretty fortunate in that even when we did have to start shifting, because a hotline is very expensive, when we did have to start shifting to different types of funding, our funders were nobody ever put stipulations on what we could say, how we could say it, what we were doing. And like, that's pretty rare in this space. And so I'm extremely grateful for the people who literally gave us money and like trusted us with that, to allow this work to go on, to allow people to get paid to do this work. And then also just like, the community that popped up around this, like all the people I met at all of the different conferences, our Discord community, the people who listen to the podcast, like it wasn't just the folks who could give money. It's like the people who shared our videos, the teachers that still use the tropes videos in their classrooms today. Like most people I meet now are like, yeah, my teacher played it in class in middle school and that's how I met you, or that's how I learned about you or whatever, you know, and college classrooms and that sort of thing. So it really was a lot of times when you're like an individual creator, you're doing all of this work by yourself or with a small team. And it really is people believing in you and sharing and being like your voice on the streets in a big way that allow this conversation to get bigger and allow it to transform the way that it did. So, because you know, I was making videos before tropes and nobody gave a shit about those. So it really took the community to be like, no, this is important. Y'all listen up. So I don't know what I'm missing. I'm probably missing a bunch of shit, but like, those are the big ones that I'm thinking about right now. And I don't know, it's 15 years, fucking long time.
It's a long time.
You know, and all like, there's also like all the people that worked for us and volunteered for us and were a part of this at different phases and like, put up with me in all of those different phases, you know, like, you know, Jae came on in a time when I was like way more loosey-goosey, where before, like I was so paranoid about every single word that we said and put out and like having people around me who like respected and honored that and helped me feel safe and like supported in this space, in addition to being like good at their jobs and doing amazing work. I think I wouldn't have survived this if I didn't have some really core people who never shamed me for like anxieties or insecurities or worries. Like people took my fears and concerns seriously, and that makes such a huge difference.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both for your candor today. That has been our show. If people, I don't know, I'm actually thinking about putting a little homework list together for people who want to read these books like The Nap Ministry and Burnout and the stuff that we talked about. So that might be linked in the show notes. But do you want to share your personal social media handles where people can stay up to date?
What is social media anymore,
Man,
really?
I do not know. I haven't a clue at this time.
Have you heard of this cool new platform called X?
Listen, I used to guest lecture at colleges and conferences about social media. I was an expert professionally on social media. Today, I'm like, what is even happening? Like, I'm with,
Oh my gosh.
I'm with cans in a string at this moment. But if something changes, where can people maybe keep up with you?
So I'm at Anita Sarkeesian on everything. I'm also on all the new shit, Blue Sky and Threads, and however long any of that shit lasts. I'm a little bit less active right now, but that's definitely where I will post new projects and things and thoughts and whatever. So you can always find me at that handle on whatever social media you're on, Instagram. And I think the Feminist Frequency the Feminist Frequency Twitter, and well, we don't know what's happening with Twitter. At least the Instagram is going to stay active. So that'll be like podcast updates, I suspect.
Yeah.
So like keep following that as well.
I'm not a big social media person, but on Twitter, I'm Envy Plays Games, Envy with an I, so ENVI Plays Games. And then on Instagram, I mostly post my artwork stuff there, so I'm Doodle Me Alive. I'm also Doodle Me Alive on Facebook. But yeah, really, really feeling pro cans with strings and pro pen pal energy these days.
Also, I'd want to say that Jae has a super dope project. Do you want to talk about it? The Patreon?
My art project.
Yeah.
I think in my next chapter, I'm also resting, but also trying to think about how to integrate my passions more. I've kept it all very separate. Like, this is a space for games only, and then this is a space for art only. But yeah, one of my favorite art projects that I'm running around right now is called Heartwork. It's been a few different things, but it's kind of always been like a monthly, snail mail kind of, like affirmations subscription-y thing where every month I design an affirmation and send it out as like a postcard or a sticker, or now I do these like collectible cards. They're like tarot size cards. And because I started doing the cards, it became a deck. So it's the Heartwork deck that is filled with like reminders around the 4 main suits of being, healing, wayfinding, and thriving. And so every month it's a new card of a new suit, and it exists in people's snail mail boxes. See, I'm very pro physical mail. And it's felt really, really fulfilling to work on, and I just love it. I'm so excited for the deck to be completed whenever it tells me that it's completed.
I love that. You can find me at your nearest pneumatic tube. I am using cat_ex_machina on all the new socials as well. I just haven't really posted anything. And FemFreak is where you can continue to stay up to date with the podcast. There's no bonus episode today for Patreon, but next week the podcast continues as before with more feminist media criticism goodness from me, your shiny new host. Sure. Shiny because I'm sweating. It's hot. And also, yes, for the Patreon supporters, we have a Discord, and so you can also stay in touch with me there. That's it for me. Anita, why don't you close it out?
Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to stay subscribed to the Patreon. That's great. We did great.
We did it.
Hi. No, but we have to do it. We have to do it at the same time. Kat, you ready?
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.
We did it.
As smooth as ever.